Welcome back. If you are new here, special welcome to you. My name is Katie, the Homesteading RD, and today's gonna be fun. I am almost out of bone broth, so I thought I would bring you guys along the way on how I make bone broth. It is such a nourishing and just amazing ingredient to have on hand. Not only that, but it's just a great way to use up those extra bones left over from cooking. And so I'm going to show you my way of making bone broth. I have all sorts of goodies thought out, so we'll be talking about bones and the best ingredients to use. And I am a registered dietitian, so we'll talk about some fun little tidbits along the way. I love to nerd out with you guys about nutrition. So yeah, this will be fun. Let's go ahead and get started. So you might be wondering what bone broth is exactly and how it's different from regular broth or stock. So stock and bone broth can be used pretty interchangeably, where regular broth, what you're probably used to at the grocery store, is mostly just flavored water. You can make that out of most anything. Veggie scraps, bones, just simmer it for an hour or two and you'll get some flavor in there. Where bone broth, that is next level. So that is where we're slowly cooking down any bones, connective tissue, the carcasses of animals, skin, you name it. And what happens over that long period of time is those tightly bundled protein structures start to unfold and unravel. And then later on, when we cool it down, they kind of reform in a sheet or a big mesh. And then we get some lovely collagen formation. So it's gonna hopefully get super jiggly for us, and that is the sign that we have achieved that collagen. Now there's a few steps involved to make sure that you get a good formation and that you don't overdo it or underdo it. So hopefully we'll get it right today, and that collagen is just so good for our bodies. Not only is it just really delicious, I enjoy bone broth, it's just so nourishing when I drink it, but it's gonna help support your joints, it helps support your internal organs, it's great for our skin, it's great for literally everything. Bone broth, I feel like, is the miracle food out there, so you definitely need to be making it if you aren't already. So, all right, enough excitement about bone broth, let's get to making it. All you need are some leftover bones. We'll talk about the best ones to use in a minute. A crock pot is what I like to use to cook it down, but you could totally use a stock pot as well. We're gonna add some water and some apple cider vinegar, but you can use any kind of vinegar. White vinegar totally works if that's all you have. Let's talk bones. We're gonna start loading up the crock pots here. So I have a variety of different bones. These are all gonna be chicken bones because I'm gonna be focusing on chicken bone broth today, but you can use this same principle for beef bone broth, venison bone broth, as I made a lot of that this fall with deer season. You can even make fish broth. You can really get creative here. So what I have is any bones that I collected throughout the last few months from things that we ate. So if we ate chicken wings, anything that was left over, the wing tips went in this bag. If I roasted a chicken, you know, once we carved everything off and consumed every little bit we could, the carcass went in the bag. Anything like that, we save. And then when I know I'm gonna make bone broth, I just grab all my different Ziploc bags of bones out of the freezer into the fridge just to let them thaw out for a day. So I did start this yesterday, and now we're ready to roll. So let's see what I have in here. First up is a chicken carcass. These make lovely bone broth, especially just all the little bones in here. The flexible breastbone has a lot of collagen, and there's usually some bits of skin on here. We have the tail, so this is definitely going in. We have a second carcass here. This one was well picked over. We'll put that one over here. And I like to do 2 crock pots at a time, so if you have 2, that's great. If not, just fill the one, or again, you can use a big stock pot. And then we have other little tidbits, like wing tips are amazing. You're gonna get all sorts of collagen formation from that. Other little, I think these are upper arm bones. And don't worry if these have been seasoned. Usually when I make wings, there's like wing sauce on here. Honestly, I feel like it just adds to the flavor. Out of Ziploc bag number 2, we have another chicken carcass, and this one's gonna be awesome because look at all of this skin on here. So skin actually is loaded with collagen. About 30% by weight is collagen, where bones is only 20% and meat is only 1%. So definitely save that skin. We'll tuck this one in here. You wanna make sure you're really kind of jamming them in here good. Another carcass, we'll put that one in there. Here's a chicken neck. These also make amazing bone broth. I have another carcass, but I'm not sure, well, I think that will fit. So you wanna make sure that your bones are fully covered with water. So I think we'll be good with 3 carcasses in here because this one's slightly bigger than this guy. I have just other remaining bones. We'll spread evenly here. And then I have my secret ingredient. And that's chicken feet. And if you're kind of grossed out by the idea of putting chicken feet in your bone broth, I get it. This was me in the very beginning. Even though we were raising our own meat chickens, I just couldn't get over the mental block of putting these in my broth until I actually researched it and realized that you can peel the chicken feet and get all of that skin and poop and gunk off. And now it's been a game changer. I always add these to my broth. It really does make the best broth. These feet are just loaded with collagen. So yeah, definitely do it. You won't regret it. So I like to keep them all just in a loose Ziploc bag so I can just grab a couple anytime I make some bone broth. So 2 per crock pot works pretty good for me. And while I know it seems like a lot of Ziploc bags and plastic, I always reuse these. So we just dumped out the bones and I just throw them right back in the freezer and we can load them up for the next few months. So I'd say this looks pretty good. We are nice and full, but not over full. Everything will be covered by water, but there's not too little bones either. We really want a dense, nutritious broth. So let's go ahead and add some water. Now what's really gonna set a good broth apart from a poor quality broth are these beginning starting steps to really set you up for success. So what I'm gonna be doing is adding cold water to the bones, and then we're just gonna let it sit and not touch it for an hour. So next we're just doing a double check that everything is fully submerged. We are pretty close. They will kind of drop down as the contents loosen and start to break down. So this is good enough for me. You just definitely don't want like entire chunks fully exposed. It looks like we have a little foot sitting there. So we'll try and tuck this one in. Get this bone kind of nestled in there. This one's flipping up, so let's try, especially that knuckle, that joint is really gonna give us that good collagen. So that looks good to me. Now the last step before these guys sit is to add some vinegar. I'm using apple cider vinegar, but you can use anything. And I don't really measure, we're just gonna do a heavy bloop and a heavy bloop. That's probably like 2 to 3 tablespoons. And what that vinegar is gonna do is really help the tissues and the bones and ligaments and tendons, all those goodies to really break down efficiently so that we can get those nutrients, the minerals, the collagen, all that good stuff. So don't skip that step. And now we just set our timer. We're gonna put the lids on and wait an hour. This waiting period is key to give these bones a cold start so that, again, you're gonna get that clear, wonderful broth. So don't cut corners, you'll appreciate this step. So you may have noticed that I skipped 3 different things with the bone broth so far. I did not wash my bones, I did not roast my bones, and there's no vegetables in there. So as far as washing the bones go, I feel like that's only necessary if you're getting bones from like conventionally raised animals, like let's say a rotisserie chicken at your grocery store. Yeah, I would probably rinse that. But with mine, they're pretty clean. I know what has gone on with the animal from beginning to end, and what you'll notice if you kind of have some unclean bones or low quality bones is you'll get a lot of scum layer at the top. I hardly ever get that. So I feel like there's no reason to wash the bones for me. And for roasting the bones, I do that for my beef bones and my venison bones because it really helps caramelize them and develop that deep flavor, and that's just wonderful for that kind of broth. But for chicken broth, I'm not necessarily looking for that. I just kind of want a simple chicken bone broth that's pretty flexible and I can use it for cooking rice and stuff like that. So I do not roast my chicken bones ahead of time. And the vegetable part, I feel like that's what sets me apart from a lot of people. I feel like most people make their bone broth with veggie scraps, which I think is great, and I do that sometimes. But I'm kind of a simple gal. I just want a simple plain broth that I can use in a lot of different applications without any side flavors. But if I do, I'll save like the butt ends of onions, maybe even the onion peels, carrots that are a little limp, you know, celery, that type of a thing. It makes a great addition to broth, but don't add it now. We want to add that later on in the process. So either way, no vegetables yet. Okay, so these guys have had an hour to sit and soak, so now is the easy part. We just fire up the crock pots. Get the second one going here, and you'll definitely want the temperature on low, and low and slow is what we're going for. If you're noticing any boiling going on in here, even when it's on low, sometimes it can happen. Just kind of tilt the lid a little bit so that the steam can escape, and that should help the temperature come down. And if you're using a stock pot, you know, definitely as low heat as possible. Keep an eye on it. You just want like a really slow simmer, not boiling. What happens if you boil your bone broth is you're going to end up with a cloudy broth. So we want to keep it as clear as possible, and the low and slow method will definitely help get you there. Now, timing varies a little bit depending on what kind of bones you're using. So we're using chicken bones today. Those need to go about 12 hours, but your bigger bones like beef bones or venison bones, those closer to about 18 to 24 hours. So we'll definitely want to check in along the way though. There's another step that we'll need to do depending on the quality of the bones. So we'll see what we see together in a few hours. I'm going to let this sit for a quick second while I fill you guys in on something that has helped me feel energized despite these cold and dark days of winter. As a dietitian, I'm super picky about my supplements. And when I looked into the foundational nutrition supplement AG1, I knew I was onto something great. It is so much more than a simple greens powder, as it combines vitamins, minerals, prebiotics, probiotics, superfoods, antioxidants, stress adaptogens, and digestive enzymes. I've been enjoying AG1 for the past 6 months, so I'm a firm believer by now, and my favorite time to incorporate it is mid-morning. I love that I can feel a boost in energy without that jittery feeling that caffeine can bring on. Some other benefits that I've noticed since drinking AG1 is an improvement in my gut health. AG1 contains prebiotics and probiotics that they really work together to support our body's digestion and alleviate bloating. And after the holidays, that's definitely appreciated. AG1 is super simple to use. All you do is pull your stainless steel container out of the fridge, measure out a scoop, and add it to 8 to 10 ounces of water. Give it a shake and enjoy. So you're probably wondering what it tastes like. It has a mild pineapple and vanilla flavor, which I really like, but you can also add a squeeze of lemon or mix it with some coconut water to mix it up. Go to my link below or scan my QR code to subscribe and save $20 off your first subscription of AG1, which also comes with 5 free travel packs and the full welcome kit. Thanks to AG1 for sponsoring today's video. All right, my friends, it has been a few hours now. Everything has fully come up to temp. Let's see how it looks. So nothing is boiling. That's a good sign. It is just starting to bubble a little bit. And this is the key point to look for scum. So I see a very little amount here. We have some little bubbles. And this one, just very little amounts. Now the scum, it's important to get a little strainer and scoop that off the top because those are impurities and that can impart a bitter flavor that you don't necessarily want in your bone broth. So the interesting thing that you'll find is varying amounts of scum on the bone broth depending on the quality of bones that you use. So if you are using just conventionally raised chicken bones, you're probably going to find a lot of scum on there, where these bones that I'm using tonight are all bones from our own meat chickens that we raised out on pasture. Yeah, very little toxins there, so less scum. And I'll show you the process to skim this off. So I just like this fine strainer and just kind of go along the top and pull off what you can find. So there's not too much in here, but we got a little bit out. And also, if you are finding a lot of scum, it's a good idea to come through a couple of times in the beginning of the cooking process, because the earlier you get it out, the better. So now I'm just going to close these guys up and we'll see how it looks in the morning. Good morning. Let's take a peek and see how everything is looking. I checked on these right before I went to bed last night and I noticed that they were kind of simmering a little harder than I wanted them to. So I ended up sticking a little chopstick in there and now it's perfect. It's just like really lightly going. So let's take a closer look at how everything's looking now. So you can see the color is really nice and golden now. Everything is pretty soft. So anything that was kind of sticking up earlier has definitely broken down and kind of settled in. Same with this one. So I think we are there, but it is very hot. So I'm gonna just unplug these and give this about an hour to cool down and then we'll get started on the next step. All right, so let's bring these guys over here. They have cooled a little bit. They're not piping hot at least, but not fully cool. We're not gonna fully cool it just yet, but this next step, I'm so excited. This is the doggies' very favorite thing ever. They've been waiting very patiently, so let's go ahead and get it prepped for them. So what I like to do is just get a big bowl with a big strainer, I guess, on top of it. And then with a slotted spoon, I just like to get out the big chunks. Before long, I think the dogs will know what we're up to and hopefully make their way over here. As you can see, everything has definitely just kind of fallen apart. Those whole carcasses are not whole anymore. And I like to get our little fine mesh tool out and get any kind of smaller stuff out of there. The big tail there. The smaller stuff I like to put in a different dish. So alternatively, you could pour this whole thing over the strainer into a bowl, but this is less work in my opinion. Less mess. This thing is heavy, it's hot. Oh, looks like we have somebody already. Hi, Benny. We'll see how long it takes Tucker and Roxy to figure it out. You ready for treats? It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but I'm just trying to get the big chunks out of there. Oh, I see Tucker making his way. You guys want to get your sister? Hi there. Okay, that's it for the big chunks. Let's see whatever else we can get out of here. Oh, there was some big chunks left. Just never quite know. That's good enough for me. So this is still steaming a little bit, so I'm gonna set that aside for a second while we talk about these guys. So this is technically finished bone broth. So if you want to enjoy it this week, feel free to do that with your cooking or just sipping on it. But again, I'm someone that makes a lot of this. This is only good in the fridge for about a week. This is a meat product, so I'm gonna tuck these away to enjoy for the months to come. So you really have two options. First is freezing it, which is super simple. The next option is pressure canning it, so it's a shelf-stable product. And that's something that I love to do, and that's something we're gonna be doing together tomorrow. So we have one more step before we can get to both freezing it or pressure canning it, is we need to cool this down because you don't want to put hot items right into the freezer. And for pressure canning, we have one more step. So I'm going to move these guys to the porch. It's December in Minnesota, so the great outdoors is a lovely refrigerator for us this time of year. So I'm going to throw these outside real quick. Okay, we've made it to the very exciting part here on our homestead. All three of the doggies are here ready to go. So all I do now is these bones have cooled slightly. I just start picking through it and pulling out the meaty tidbits and giving them to the dogs. Who's ready for their treats? Are we gonna take turns? We got Tucker and Roxy and Benny. Oh, don't lick my fingers. I don't blame you. Okay. All right, honey girl, you're slipping all over the place. Let's get this rug over here for you. Roxy's 15. She just doesn't quite have the coordination she used to. How's that? Okay, let's give this another go. Oh, there's a good skin piece. Oh. Merry Christmas to you guys. So it is Christmas Eve. I can't think of a better present for the dogs. Tucker, good job. Now Roxy, woo, you're aggressive with that one. Now, even though I'm giving them to the dogs, that doesn't mean that it's only dog food. If you want to use the shredded chicken for tacos or whatever, you can totally do that. It's edible and great. I just started doing this years ago and they just so look forward to it. I can't take it back from them. So this is their little Christmas treat. Roxy, it's your turn. Hey, girly. Honey, pay attention. Right here. There. This one's for Banny. Oh, you guys love this stuff, don't you? Oh, good one for Tucker here. Yum. Banny. Careful with my fingers, please. Oh, easy. You okay? It's your turn, so get it together. There you go. Roxy. Ow, that hurt. Ugh. Whoa. Be careful, honey. Whoa. Wait, come here. Okay, that was gentle. That was good. Gotten a little aggressive with her hand feeding in her old age. All right, Beanie. Yum. The bones literally just kind of fall apart. So to be honest, the bones probably would be fine if the dogs happen to get them, but I'm just not willing to risk that. All right, guys, I think we did it. Oh, there you go, little girl. Okay. Was that delicious? Oh, that was so good. Oh, good job. Merry Christmas. So the dogs have done a lovely job eating anything salvageable out of here. So all that's left over are just the bones. So you have a few options. You can dispose of these, or you can put them in your compost if you so choose. I'm personally not, because bones do have a decent amount of phosphorus, and my soil test showed that I have high levels of phosphorus in my garden. So I don't necessarily want to create a high phosphorus compost. So could be great, could not be great, depending on what your soil needs. If you need phosphorus, I definitely would. I've also heard of people blending this up and making kind of like a bone meal, which would be an excellent kind of supplement for your soil if you need, again, that phosphorus. I personally never done it. I actually don't even own a blender, so I can't say if that truly works or not, but just some options for you. So now we're just at another waiting point. I have the crock pots cooling off on the front porch. However, it is below freezing, so I'm not gonna leave them out too long, just enough till they get to like fridge temperature, and then I'm gonna move them to my fridge just to hold until I'm ready to pressure can, which will be tomorrow. So if you haven't noticed by now, it's kind of a multi-day process between the thawing out of the bones, making the bone broth, cooling the bone broth, and then preserving it. So you kind of have to plan ahead, but each step isn't hard, and it's just a lot of waiting time in between. So catch you guys tomorrow for the last step. And good morning. These guys are fully cooled now. Let's see what we've got. So you can see that we have a nice fat layer on top, which we'll address in a minute, but let's see. Oh yeah, we've got a nice jiggly broth for both. So now what I like to do is use a little spatula and just go along and remove this top fat layer. So the reason why we're doing this is because fat, it tends to be the first thing that'll go rancid or go bad in a preserved product. So if you are planning on freezing this or pressure canning it and storing it for a decent amount of time, I would say about a year, I would consider removing the fat. This is really going to extend the shelf life, but if you are planning on using it fairly quickly, and actually this is something I've been considering lately with my bone broth, because we tend to use it up within like 3 to 4 months, I probably could leave the fat in there. And this is good, healthy fat, as long as you're using organic, pasture-raised animals. But for this time, this will probably be my last time. I'll go ahead and go through the process just so you can see it all. Now this fat you definitely want to hang on to. Again, this is great, delicious fat, and we can use this for cooking. You can render it down to make schmaltz, which is rendered down chicken fat. Definitely don't throw it out. Now, I'm not absolutely perfect about the fat. I get most of it out if I can, so that's pretty good. That's what I'm going for. And this one actually is a little bit softer, which is kind of interesting. Each crock pot I feel like just cooks slightly different, even though we had pretty much the same ingredients. So this one's a little bit harder to remove. I'm just doing my best here. But again, if you're planning on using this up pretty soon, whether you're freezing it or pressure canning it, you don't have to do this step. So now we're at the point where if you are planning on freezing your bone broth, this is the perfect time. It's nice and chilled, so it's low risk for transferring into your glass mason jars. Just make sure that you're using a wide mouth mason jar and you're not overfilling. So I don't know if you can see that very well, but this is a freeze fill lines right above my thumb. You don't want to go any higher than that, otherwise you risk shattering it. But if you want to pressure can and make a shelf-stable product, let's go ahead and heat this up. So I just like to put the crock pots back in the bases and heat them up this way. You could do it in a stock pot, but I like this method. That way you don't have to clean yet another container. So we'll check back in a couple hours when this is hot and get to pressure canning. Okay, I have everything fired up and ready to go to start canning, so I'll give you a little tour. So our star of the show, we have the pressure canner here. I have a little bit of heat on there to start heating up the water. I have about 2 inches in there because I don't want to be putting hot jars into cold water. So just kind of heating that up. I have the first tray in there. There's these nice little inserts that the jars will sit on, and this is level 2. Not all pressure canners offer 2 level, but this one does, which is just awesome. I'll make sure to link this in the description if you're interested. This is the All-American pressure canner, which is just the best one out there that I know of. Love this pressure canner. And if you're new to pressure canning, I actually have a full tutorial on how to pressure can with this pressure canner on my website. I'll make sure to link that in the description. And then over here in the sink, we have my jars soaking in hot water. So we'll get the jars up to temp. Same with the canning lids so that those are ready to go. Let's go ahead and just bring these over here with us. So over here we have our bone broth, which is pretty warm now, so we're good to go there. Have my rings ready. I have a funnel with a strainer built in, which is great. So I'll just kind of get any leftover bits. You can also level up and put a layer of cheesecloth in there to really catch any tidbits, but that is good enough for me. We have some vinegar water with the towel here, so we'll be wiping our rims to make sure we have a good seal. We have our jar lifter, which is definitely going to come in handy. Make sure you have one of these if you're canning, and a nice little scooper. I like to start with just 2 jars at a time, and this is super easy part. Just scoop it in. And we are looking for about 1 inch of headspace. So about up to this ring here. That one looks good. Move on to jar 2. Move this a little closer. Now I just like to dip the corner of my cloth into the vinegar. Give it a quick little once over our warm lids. And just fingertip tight. I don't like to absolutely crank on them, but you want them nice and secure. So into the pressure canner they go. And I can't remember if I mentioned this earlier or not, but you do absolutely have to pressure can bone broth. You can't do your water bath canner, as tempting as that would be, but nope, we need that high heat temperature to really make this low acid food safe. Nobody wants botulism, that's for sure. I almost forgot to wipe the rim there. There we go. We'll see how many jars we get out of here. My bone broth ends up fairly concentrated. You can see it's that nice golden color. And that's fine with me. I tend to dilute it a little bit when I cook with it. So if maybe my recipe calls for 3 cups of broth, I'll just add 1 can and add the remainder amount of water. But if you'd like it more diluted to start, you can definitely add water at this point. And I'm using a couple of different lid brands today. So I have the classic ball lids. This just came with another set of canning jars that I bought recently. But my go-to lately over the last year has been 4 jars. I've been so impressed with the quality. You can just feel them. I wish you could feel the difference, but they're thicker. The rubber feels better on the actual seal. And I just have a really great seal rate with these, so I've been super impressed. Usually this works out perfectly where 2 crock pots fills both levels of my pressure canner. So we'll see how we do. And I try not to stir up my crock pot because then any of the residual stuff that I didn't strain out of there gets mixed into the top. So I'm just kind of scooping from the top, and then it comes out pretty darn clear. And it looks like we have the first row complete. So we have 8 jars in there. So we'll just add our divider and start the second row. Okay, we are full and ready to go. It's time to get the lid on. So just want to make sure that we're matching up the arrow with the notch here. Sliding it in place. And then we're gonna tighten these bolts across from each other until it's nice and snug. That's good. And then another cross pattern. You don't want to go around in a circle. You'll get the most stable seal this way. All 6 are tight. And now we'll just let it sit for a minute. We're gonna wait until we see some true steam coming out of here. There's some little spits coming out, but we want a little bit more pressure to build up in here before we move on to the next step. And while that's sitting there, let's talk about the elephant in the room, and that's about this temperature and pressure canning the bone broth. You might remember at the beginning when we were talking about cooking the bone broth and getting it started that we wanted to avoid boiling it or avoiding too high of a temperature, because what happens then is those long collagen strands can break and then you can end up with not as good of a gel. And that will happen with pressure canning a little bit, because pressure canning not only boils, it's a high temperature. So instead of 212 degrees, it's gonna get up to 240. So yeah, we are gonna end up breaking some of our collagen strands, but the good news is that the collagen is still there. We're still gonna benefit from it, but if you're really looking for a gelled type product, if you need that kind of structure, then you're gonna be disappointed. But for me, I know the collagen is still in there, and I do like the convenience of having a jar ready to go at any time. But I'm starting to turn the corner on pressure canning versus freezing. I typically always pressure can it. I've been doing it for almost 10 years. I do love that it's shelf stable, because if there's an emergency and you lose power and you don't have backup power, you could lose whatever's in your chest freezer. But I do love how much easier it is to freeze versus pressure canning. This is like a whole nother step I could have been done this morning if I was just loading up the jars. But I also, if you saw my tour of my food stores and everything, I actually have more freezer space now than I do like food storage, like on the shelf space. So I'm kind of leaning more towards freezing it again, plus of course the nutritional benefits. Even though the collagen is still technically there, I just feel like you do probably lose a few things. So either way is great. They each have their purposes, so you just have to figure out what's best for you. Okay, we are steaming. I don't think you might be able to kind of see it, but it's a steady steam. You can kind of feel it with your hand. It's not super hot. So what we're gonna do now is set our timer for 10 minutes before we add pressure. And we did pretty good. Both crock pots are empty, and we just had one extra jar that didn't fit into the canner. So I'm just gonna throw this in the fridge. We'll use it this week with cooking. So that's another reason why I love doing 2 crock pots, because it's just perfect to fill my pressure canner. So our 10 minutes of vent steaming is complete. So we're gonna add our weight on here. So I'm doing 10 pounds of pressure. I am pretty much at sea level. If you are at a higher altitude, make sure to do your research into that. But 15 is probably what you're looking for if you're at a higher altitude, but 10 for sure, the minimum. So I'm gonna get my oven mitt on because that steam is hot, and put it on like this. All right, now we're off to the races. So here's our little pressure gauge. We're already at like 2 PSI, so it's gonna come up to 10, and then some magic is gonna happen. All right, we have hit our 10 pounds of pressure. So this little weight has been rattling to let out any residual pressure. So it's time to turn down the heat a little bit. I like it kind of just above a simmer. And what we're looking for is this to settle down a little bit. We only want it jiggling maybe 1 to 4 times a minute. I'll kind of keep an eye on it and keep kind of tweaking my temperature till we hit that sweet spot. If it's not rattling enough, meaning the temperature is too low, then the temperature will be too low in there and not safe. Where the flip side, if you just have it going nonstop and it's constantly rattling, you could potentially dry the inside of the pressure canner out. So we have that 2 inches in there. If it's constantly steaming, it could go dry and that could ruin your pressure canner. So it's important to get this step right. And I almost forgot the other important part. We need to set our timer. So 20 minutes is perfect for the pint jars. If you're doing quart jars, you want to go for 25. So it's been 20 minutes. Our timer just went off. So all we're going to do is turn off the heat and don't touch it. So we're just going to give it time to slowly let the pressure go. The dial gauge will eventually come down to 0, and then we'll finally be at the last step. Okay, our pressure is down to 0, so wearing a hot pad, of course. Let's get the weight off, and then we're gonna unscrew. I really got that on good. The alternating ones again. And we'll see what we have in here. Woohoo! It's looking pretty dark in here. It's 3:30 and it's already getting dark. So we'll turn on the fluorescent lights, which I hate, but it is what it is. All right, so jar lifter, let's pull them out. And some of my lids are a little bit loose, so I like to go back through and just kind of get them back to finger tight. They are so hot. But just gently. Okay, that looks good. Get the second row out. And that's a wrap. I'm just gonna let these fully cool. I won't touch them at all until late tonight, maybe even in the morning, and then I'll take the rings off. You definitely don't want to store your jars with the rings on because that can create a false seal. So it's better just to keep an eye on them. And when a seal fails, you'll know when the ring is not on there. So yeah, we'll just let these chill out. Thanks again so much for coming along on the journey of making bone broth. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions at all about the process, feel free to ask in the comments. Make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you on the next video.